ground in the heart of the whispering woods, where ancient trees whispered secrets to the wind. I was born of starlight and earth. I am Thicket, once a proud guardian spirit of the forest, keeper of its deepest mysteries and protector of all who dwelled within its leafy embrace. My form was that of a great stag, coat shimmering with the colors of the changing seasons, antlers aglow with ethereal light that could pierce the darkest shadows. For centuries, I roamed the verdant paths of my domain. My hooves left trails of wildflowers in their wake, and the very air hummed with life where I passed. The creatures of the forest were my charges, from the tiniest field mouse to the wisest old bear. I knew their songs, their sorrows, their joys. When drought threatened, my antlers wept life-giving dew. When wildfire raged, I called upon the rain to quench its fury. But my idyllic existence was not to last. The world beyond our borders was changing, and with it came new threats to the delicate balance we had maintained for so long. It began with subtle signs: birds bringing tales of strange smoke on the horizon, deer speaking of oddly dressed two-legged creatures venturing closer to our borders. I paid little heed at first, confident in the ancient magics that protected our realm. Such hubris would prove to be my downfall. As the seasons turned, the whispers grew more urgent. A dark power was taking root at the edge of the whispering woods. Trees at the forest's fringe began to sicken and die, their life force drained by some unseen malevolence. Small animals fled deeper into the woods, bearing stories of a fortress rising from barren earth, its black towers stabbing at the sky like accusing fingers. The other guardian spirits grew restless. Oakfather, ancient and wise, counseled caution. We must not act rashly. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. This evil is beyond anything we have faced before. But I was young and brash, certain of my own power. We cannot wait while our home withers, I argued. I will confront this darkness and drive it from our lands. Ignoring the pleas of my fellow spirits, I set out alone towards the edge of the forest. As I left the heart of my domain, I felt my powers begin to wane, yet still I pressed on. The lush greenery gave way to twisted, sickly plants, and the very air grew thick with the stench of dark magic. Finally, I beheld the source of our woes, a fortress of obsidian and steel, surrounded by a moat of bubbling, noxious liquid. At its center stood a tower that seemed to devour light itself. This, I knew, was the lair of the sorcerer who threatened all I held dear. Gathering what remained of my power, I took physical form and strode to the fortress gates. Foul defiler, I bellowed, my voice shaking the very foundations of the dark keep. I am Thicket, guardian of the whispering woods. Leave these lands or face the wrath of nature itself. For a moment, all was silent. Then, a laugh echoed from the tower, a sound like breaking glass that set my fur on end. A figure appeared on the balcony above, cloaked in shadows that moved of their own accord. Ah, the vaunted forest spirit, the sorcerer's voice dripped with contempt. I wondered when one of you would gather the courage to face me, though I must say, I expected someone more impressive. Anger flared within me, and with it a reckless surge of power. I charged, intending to bring the full fury of the forest down upon this arrogant human, but I had underestimated my foe. As I leapt, the sorcerer's hands moved in a complex gesture, and the very air around me solidified. Foolish spirit, he sneered, descending the tower steps with unnatural grace. You'll make a fine addition to my collection. I struggled against the magical bonds, but it was useless. The sorcerer began to chant in a language that made my very essence recoil. Pain unlike anything I had ever known seared through my body. I watched in horror as my graceful limbs twisted and warped, becoming gnarled and monstrous. My luminous coat hardened into scales, sharp and unyielding. Antlers that once crowned my head with glory shrank and curved into vicious horns. As the transformation neared its end, the sorcerer spoke words of binding, weaving them into the very fabric of the curse. I felt my will, my very identity, being stripped away layer by layer. Welcome to your new life, beast, the sorcerer cackled, his eyes gleaming with triumph. You'll guard my treasures for eternity, a fitting fate for one so arrogant. Perhaps spending a few centuries as a monster will teach you humility. With a gesture, he opened a portal of swirling darkness beneath my feet. As I fell into the abyss, my last thoughts were of the forest I had failed, and the terrible fate that awaited those I had sworn to protect. I plummeted through suffocating blackness, finally crashing onto the cold stone floor of what would become my prison. As I lay there, My transformed body racked with pain, I heard the sorcerer's voice one final time. "Enjoy your stay in my dungeon. Guardian, your suffering has only just begun." Time lost all meaning in the perpetual gloom of the dungeon. Days blurred into years, years into decades. The dank darkness became my world, the cold stone my only companion. I, who once danced with moonbeams and conversed with ancient trees, was reduced to a creature of base instincts, hunger, rage, and the compulsion of the sorcerer's curse. My new form was a horror beyond imagining. Where once I had borne the majestic shape of a stag, I now slouched on misshapen limbs, my body a patchwork of scales, fur, and chitinous plates. Wicked claws tipped my fingers and toes, and a mouthful of fangs replaced my gentle herbivore's teeth. But worst of all were the remnants of my once proud antlers, now twisted into cruel horns that sparked with corrupted magic. The sorcerer had been true to his word. I was indeed a guardian, though not of the forest I loved. Instead, I was bound to protect his ill-gotten treasures, a mindless beast driven to attack any who dared enter my lair. And there were many who tried. I lost count of the would-be heroes who fell to my claws and fangs. Knights in shining armor, battle-hardened mercenaries, cunning rogues all met the same fate in the end. With each life I took, a piece of my old self died as well. The gentle spirit I had once been retreated further into the recesses of my mind, buried beneath layers of bestial instinct and magical compulsion. But I was not alone in this underground hell. Other creatures prowled the shadowy corridors, goblins with eyes that glowed in the dark, wraiths that wailed of ancient sorrows, and things far worse that defied description. We were all prisoners here, bound by dark magic to protect the sorcerer's wealth. Some, like the mindless skeletons that clattered through the halls, seemed content with their lot. Others, like the vampire who laired in the eastern wing, harbored bitter resentment, but were powerless against the curse that bound them. A few, driven mad by centuries of confinement, babbled endlessly to themselves in the darkness. I came to know my fellow captives, though our interactions were rarely peaceful. Territory was fiercely guarded, and the sorcerer's magic often drove us to fight amongst ourselves when there were no intruders to occupy our violent urges. Yet in rare moments of lucidity, I sensed a kinship with these other tortured souls. There was Grimclaw, a goblin chieftain who had once led his tribe in the mountains before being enslaved by the sorcerer. Though twisted by dark magic, he retained a cunning mind and often spoke of escape, though his plans never came to fruition. Whisper, a wraith who had once been a queen in a long-forgotten kingdom, drifted through the halls lamenting her fate. In quieter moments, she would share fragments of her mortal life, though the memories seemed to cause her great pain. And then there was the thing in the pit, a creature so ancient and terrible that even in my monstrous form, I dared not approach its lair. Its roars shook the very foundations of the dungeon, and the darkness around it seemed alive with malevolent purpose. As the years wore on, my moments of clarity grew fewer and farther between. The beast took over, driven by an insatiable hunger that no amount of flesh could sate. I became the monster that haunted adventurers' nightmares, a creature of shadow and savagery that knew no mercy. Yet in the deepest recesses of my corrupted mind, a tiny spark of my true self remained. In rare, quiet moments, I yearned for the forest, for the feel of soft earth beneath my hooves and the rustle of leaves overhead. I remembered the taste of cool, clear streams and the scent of wildflowers on the breeze. But these memories brought only pain, reminders of all I had lost through my own arrogance. Decades turned to centuries, and I resigned myself to an eternity of torment. The world above changed and evolved, but in the timeless dark of the dungeon, we remained unchanging, bound by ancient magic and forgotten by the realms of light. Then came the day when everything changed. A group of adventurers breached the dungeon's outer defenses, their voices echoing through corridors that had known only the sounds of suffering for so long. There was something different about these intruders, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere greed. As they drew nearer to my lair, I felt the familiar surge of rage and hunger. The curse demanded blood, and I had long since lost the will to resist its call. I readied myself for battle, my claws scraping against stone as I awaited my prey. But among the group was an elven druid, her eyes alight with an inner fire that spoke of ancient magics. As our paths crossed in my chamber of horrors, her gaze met mine. For a heartbeat, recognition flickered in those emerald depths. She saw beyond the monstrous exterior to the trapped spirit within. "This creature," she whispered, her voice cutting through the red haze of my fury, "it's not what it seems." Those simple words were the key that began to unlock the prison of my mind. For the first time in centuries, I felt the stirring of hope, and with it, the first trembling possibility of redemption. The druid's words sparked chaos in the chamber. Her companions, battle-hardened adventurers all, reacted with a flurry of drawn weapons and combat stances. Steel flashed in the flickering torchlight as they prepared to face what they perceived as a fearsome dungeon monster. I fought back on pure instinct, my cursed form lashing out with deadly precision. Claws raked across armor, fangs snapped at exposed flesh. The battle rage that had consumed me for centuries roared to life, drowning out all other thoughts. But the druid stood apart from the melee, her hands weaving intricate patterns in the air as she chanted in a language that stirred long-buried memories. Ancient syllables of power echoed off the stone walls, and I felt the sorcerer's magic waver for the first time in eons. As her spell took hold, the red haze of battle fury began to clear. For a brief, shining moment, I glimpsed my true self reflected in a pool of spilled blood on the floor. The sight of my former majesty, juxtaposed with the monstrous thing I'd become, gave me the strength to stay my claws, even as the compulsion screamed for me to attack. "Listen," I roared, my voice a guttural approximation of what it once was. "I am not your enemy." The adventurers hesitated, weapons still raised but no longer pressing the attack. Confusion and wariness warred on their faces as they struggled to reconcile the beast before them with my words. The druid stepped forward, her voice gentle but firm. "What are you, truly?" In halting words, I told them my story. Of the forest I once protected, of the curse that twisted me, of the long years of torment in the dungeon's depths. With each word, I felt the sorcerer's hold weaken further, allowing more of my true self to shine through. "We can help you," the druid said, hope shining in her eyes. "Our quest is to end the sorcerer's reign of terror. If we defeat him, surely your curse will be broken." I looked at the adventurers, these brave souls who dared to stand against the evil that had imprisoned me for so long. For the first time in an age, I felt something other than hunger and rage. I felt hope. "Lead the way," I growled, the words strange in my monstrous mouth. "It's time to end this nightmare." We began our ascent from the dungeon's depths, the druid using her magic to soothe the other creatures we encountered. Many, like me, seemed to regain a measure of their former selves in her presence. Some even joined our growing party, swelling our ranks with former victims of the sorcerer's cruelty. As we climbed higher, my excitement grew. I could almost taste the fresh air, could almost feel the sunlight on my fur. Freedom, so long denied, was nearly within my grasp. But as we reached the final chamber before the surface, a terrible pain ripped through my body. The sorcerer's curse, dormant but not defeated, roared back to life with a vengeance. I collapsed, my form writhing as the magic tore through me. "No," I heard the druid cry, but her voice seemed to come from a great distance. "Fight it. Remember who you are." I tried to hold on to my true self, to the memories of the forest and the hope of freedom. But the curse was too strong, fueled by dark magic and centuries of hate. I felt my mind slipping away, replaced by a rage more potent than anything I'd ever known. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the dungeon, I turned on my would-be saviors. Gone was any trace of reason or restraint. I was the monster once more, but now imbued with a terrible new strength born of thwarted hope. The adventurers fought bravely, but they were unprepared for the fury of my assault. The druid's magic, so effective before, seemed to slide off me like water off a duck's back. In my madness, I began to drive them back towards the depths of the dungeon. As my claws tore into flesh and my fangs snapped bones, a small part of me watched in horror, trapped behind the eyes of the beast. I wanted to scream, to beg them to run, to save themselves. But no words came, only snarls and roars of primal rage. Finally, bloodied and battered, the adventurers retreated. The druid was the last to flee, her eyes meeting mine one final time. In them, I saw not fear or hatred, but a deep sadness and, was that pity? "We'll find a way," she called as she disappeared into the shadows. "This isn't over. We'll come back for you, I swear it." Then they were gone, and I was alone once more in the silence of the dungeon. Slowly, terribly, my mind began to clear. The rage subsided, leaving me to face the full horror of what I'd done. I had been so close. Freedom had been within my grasp, and I had thrown it away. Worse, I had attacked those who only sought to help me. The weight of my actions crashed down upon me, and for the first time in centuries I wept. But as my tears fell to the cold stone floor, I realized something had changed. The curse's hold on me had weakened. Though I was still trapped in this monstrous form, bound to the dungeon by dark magic, I retained more of myself than ever before. The druid's words echoed in my mind. This isn't over, and I knew she was right. This was not the end, but a beginning. I had tasted hope, had glimpsed the possibility of redemption. The path to freedom would be long and fraught with peril, but I was no longer content to be a mindless beast. I lifted my head, new determination burning in my heart. The sorcerer's days were numbered. Whether it took years or centuries, I would find a way to break this curse. And when I did, I would reclaim my role as protector, not just of the forest, but of all those who suffered under the yoke of dark magic. Let the sorcerer laugh in his high tower. Let him think he'd won this round. His reign of terror would end, and I would play a part in his downfall. For I was Thicket, guardian spirit of the Whispering Woods, and my story was far from over. Thank you so very much for listening to this story. I thoroughly hope that you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe, leave a like, and comment too. I hope to see you on the next adventure.